Hey everybody, Andrew here, and today we are going to be filming part 2 of the last video I filmed. So if you guys saw that was a how to shoot better photos using just your phone tutorial. I kind of walk you guys through my favorite tips and tricks for getting better photos of cars and trucks using just your phone. Today we're going to be doing part 2, which is editing those photos. So if you haven't seen part 1, if you're on desktop, click here, or I will have a link in the comments. You can click that and go over to part 1. Now, part 2. Today we're going to be editing these photos. So I'm going to be doing a couple of different photos and we're going to be editing them in 2 basic apps. So one, I'm going to be editing just in the Instagram app. I figure everybody has that. That is a basic thing that if you're posting these photos, you're going to have, and I can kind of walk you guys through how I would edit them in there. Obviously my hands are kind of tied in terms of what I can do in that app, but it'll be the most basic way to edit a photo that pretty much all of you guys will have access to. The second way is going to be my favorite photo editing app. It's called Visco, V-S-C-O. And that app is definitely my preferred way to edit photos on my phone. Now, most of the photos that you guys see me post on Instagram are actually edited on my computer, shot with a nice camera, but I wanted to do something that was like easily accessible. So Visco is my go-to for editing phone photos. It is probably the most easy, comprehensive app, and I find that I actually get the best results from it. I really like the tools that it has, and it's a pretty powerful app. So we're gonna go ahead and use that one to edit a bunch of other photos. So before I get too carried away talking, let's get into this and start editing some photos. So we're gonna fire up the Instagram app straight away, and we're gonna edit one of the photos that I shot in the video last time. I shot this photo vertical. I find that vertical photos do better on Instagram. So we're gonna be using that as kind of our basis there. Just takes up more of the phone screen. People tend to engage with it more. So first things first, let's identify a couple of things that are wrong in this photo, right? Things that we wanna correct. I generally don't like to drop in crazy backgrounds, do massive changes to photos. I like to let the photo speak for itself, right? The magic happens in the camera and not in the editing. And there's really only so much you can do if the angles are bad. So that's why I did that last video. It really tells you guys about angles and how to shoot good angles of your vehicle. Now, in this photo, I can tell that the photo is a little bit crooked. So the left side of the photo is a little bit low. So we're gonna actually bring that up. And then I can also tell it's a little bit dark, right? There's a lot of the shadows that are hidden, and it's also very blue. So there's a blue cast over the whole photo. That's called white balance. The white balance is off based on how the camera shot it. So let's go into edit. We're gonna go into the adjust panel, and we're gonna start by straightening out this photo. Just that alone makes it feel a lot more stable, natural, and comfortable. It was a little bit weird, tipped off to that one side. So the next thing we're gonna do is just brightness. That's just so I can see a little bit better. And I'm gonna actually probably leave that on, but we'll go to like maybe 43 to start out with. We'll just start there. The next thing we're gonna do is go over to shadows and highlights. So this is the area that really matters when you're doing automotive photography, because you have such strong shadows and highlights in a vehicle, right? You have shiny parts that are really bright and you have dark parts that are really dark. So you wanna try and equal those out. So we're gonna bump up the shadows, and what I like to do is go all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom, right? Max them out in either direction to see what the extremes look like. And obviously it's not gonna look as good, but that gives you an idea of what's too far, right? So then you can go and kind of pick a middle ground. So we're gonna go somewhere there, turn it on and off to just double check. I think 41-ish looks good. Now we're gonna go to the highlights. We're gonna drop the highlights down. What that does is it gets rid of the super bright areas of the photos. And you may actually want to bring those up. I mean, there's no right or wrong in this. So we're gonna bring those highlights down to like -19. Then we're gonna go back over and we're gonna do warmth. Now warmth is where we're gonna be able to correct for that blue cast in the photo. So we're gonna bring that up a little bit. Notice I'm going back and forth, left and right to see what it looks like. Turning it on and off with by pressing on the photo. And that kind of gives me an idea of what I'm coming from and where I'm going. So that's already starting to look a lot better than the original. As you can see, it's brighter, it's easier to look at. We tipped it over so it's not, off. I'm gonna bring these highlights down just a touch, and then we're gonna go back in and add a little bit more brightness. The other thing I'm gonna do is structure. Now structure is something that's really easy to overdo, but I find that it helps your photos pop on Instagram. Because the screens are so small, it adds a little bit of sharpness and clarity and detail to your photo so that your photos pop a little bit more. Obviously, if you go overboard, it looks really bad. It looks like a crappy HDR photo. So we're gonna not wanna go overboard with that, but I find like somewhere around the 20-ish range usually looks pretty good. And that'll kind of make your photos have a little bit more pop, but it won't be something that's immediately noticeable that you change. So right around 20-ish looks pretty solid right there. So there's our before and after on this photo. Obviously it's a lot better, but what you can do in Instagram is pretty limited. All right, so next we're gonna open up my personal favorite editing app, Visco. So I already imported the photos into here. They're already in here saved. So let's go ahead and edit that first photo that we just edited in Instagram, but in Visco. This app will take a little bit of getting used to. You know, it has some really neat tips and tricks in it, but you know, if you're not used to photo editing, there's a little bit of a learning curve. There's a lot of iconography in here. But yeah, so what's cool is it has preset filters, and they're actually really useful filters. Unlike the Instagram filters that I find are really kind of tacky, these ones are actually quite nice. I will use these as a starting point sometimes I won't use them at all. But what's cool is you can actually have favorites. So I have a whole tab of favorites that I have saved, filters that I use a lot. And then it also gives you a section called For This Photo. That's really handy, especially for the pro version of this app, which I have, because there's a ton of filters. So this is actually, does a pretty good job of picking filters that would fit your photo well. So if you're at a total loss in this app, For This Photo is pretty helpful. I'm gonna tap into favorites here, kind of just go through some of my favorite filters as a starting point. I think AL3 is going to fit this photo well. So you can change the intensity of that. So I'm gonna just have it, you know, somewhere in the middle like that. And then we're gonna start the editing process. Now, again, we're gonna start by cropping the photo. So we're gonna just tip it a little bit that way, so it feels a little bit more natural. And then the other thing that I like to do right away is white balance. Now this app actually has an amazing white balance tool. You can truly correct white balance. You can do temperature and tint, and that lets you really actually dial in white balance so it's exactly what you want. Way more powerful than the Instagram app and very helpful. So in this photo where there's a huge blue cast in the photo, we are going to up the temperature, add a little bit of purple on the tint, and you guys can play with these. White balance is kind of a tricky thing to work with, but just kind of turn it on and off, see where you're going at, and that already looks a lot better. So we're gonna hit yes, keep that. Now, if you have the pro version of this app, which I highly recommend, you get what's called Hsl. So these are color sliders, so you can work in different color ranges. So right now we're in the reds, there's oranges, yellows, greens, blue, and purple. So you can work in those ranges and tweak just those colors. So you can tweak the hue of the blues, you can tweak the saturation of the blues, and you can tweak the lightness of the blues. As you can see, that is really, really helpful. Now, depending on the color of your vehicle, you'll be changing these differently. So my truck is gray, so it tends to pick up a lot of the blue from the sky. So I actually like to desaturate it. Obviously, if you go all the way over to completely desaturated, it doesn't look natural, right? It doesn't look believable. It looks like I just pulled all the blue out. So I tend to go right around there with desaturation. As you can see, turning it on and off, it looks a lot better, a lot cleaner, but it doesn't look unnatural. It looks believable, right? It just looks like a gray truck. And this is what's interesting about colors, that you're tricking your eye. There's a lot of things that if you look at them really, really closely, you think, you know, oh yeah, obviously that, you know, that truck should be gray. But if you really think about it, it's never gray, right? It's reflecting the blue from the sky, it's reflecting green from the grass, the trees, whatever. But your brain really expects it to be a certain color. And that's what you can use with color to tell a story, to trick your mind, to do things like that. So if you ever notice movies, they're really not actually accurate. They're using color as a storytelling element. They're using color to convey a sense of feeling, right? If it's scary, it's usually cold and blue toned. If it's happy, it's usually vibrant and warm toned. So you can use that to kind of mess with what you're trying to tell a story of. So in this case, we're gonna mess with a little bit. Your brain is expecting the truck to be gray. We're gonna make it gray. The other thing I like to do is shift the hue a little bit more towards the teal instead of just like the purpley blue. I just like that better. And then we're gonna bump up the lightness a little bit. Now that's gonna make the truck pop. As you can see, it is popping way more already. The other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the yellows. We're gonna shift those over, the orange, shift those over too, just to give it a little bit more of a warm feel, since this was taken at sunset. Next, we're gonna go over and do a little bit of shadow and highlight toning. We're gonna bump those shadows a little bit, just like we did in the Instagram app. And we're gonna drop down those highlights just a tad. Again, just like we did in the Instagram app. That's normalizing the shadows and highlights you have in this photo. Then we're gonna go over and we're gonna bump the exposure just a touch. brighten everything up, and there you go. That is our before and after. So as you can see, it's not anything crazy, right? It's not unbelievable. It's not something that would catch you as being super edited, but it's just a cleaner version of the original photo. Right now we can see the wheels better, the colors pop a little better, the truck pops a little better, and it's not so blue. So that's how I would edit that photo. So we're gonna go ahead and save that to the camera roll. Next photo that I wanted to edit was something that a lot of you guys would probably have in your camera. I was literally in Target, walked out to the parking lot, saw my truck, and I was like, that looks really good. So this photo wasn't taken with good light. It wasn't taken with really anything in mind other than me walking out to my truck and being like, that's a cool looking truck. So I'm sure you guys have a ton of photos like this in your camera roll. So let's go ahead and edit this. So right out of the bat, I can identify that the shadows are too dark and that the photo still has a little bit of a blue cast to it. So iPhones tend to shoot blue, just as a fun fact. So we're gonna warm it up just a smidge right there. That's gonna make the wheels look a little more accurate. I may go a little bit more. Then we're also gonna go into the shadow and highlight toning. We're gonna bump up the shadows. We're gonna drop the highlights just a little bit. That'll bring out some more detail in the wheels and everything else at the bottom of the truck. Then we're gonna go over to skin tone here. That only controls tans. So that's a handy tool if you're doing portraits and stuff, but in this case, it's actually controlling my wheels. So I'm gonna move that over to the left. That's gonna make it a little bit warmer. And then we're gonna go into our Hsl sliders, which is my favorite area. That's where the magic kind of happens. Again, we're gonna drop that blue out, do a little bit of a teal tone, bump up the lightness on the blues. We're gonna do the same thing, the orange we did last time. We're gonna move that hue over to the left, a little bit more burnt orange color. Then we're gonna go back over, we're gonna do exposure, bump up the exposure a little bit. And we're gonna do a little bit of clarity just to kind of make that photo pop a touch more. And there you go. So that's before, that's after. So as you can see, these are subtle tweaks. Like we're not doing anything crazy to this photo at all. But what we're getting is a much better, after than before, right? It's still believable, it still looks real, but what we're doing is pulling out some of the blues, we're lightening some of the shadows, we're dropping some of the highlights, we're making basically the truck pop a little bit more, and we're making the photo more pleasing to the eye. So we'll hit save on that. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys, a little secret trick that I always have is when you go to post to Instagram, I will edit pretty much every photo that I shoot. So we just edited that couple of photos. So let's go, we're gonna post one of those. So let's say we're gonna post this one in the parking lot. What I always like to do is I like to go edit and I will add brightness in the Instagram app, just like that. So you can see the before and after there, it's much brighter. And then we're gonna add structure in the Instagram app. This does two things. One, it works with the Instagram algorithm. And so Instagram actually likes when you use their editing tools. So it'll bump your photo. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I've definitely heard that from a lot of people. Two, it just makes your photo pop more. And because the Instagram app is smaller, the way that the brightness editor works, I just tend to like it better. And so I will always go in there and add a little bit of brightness and a little bit of structure no matter what photo I post. That makes the photos pop more. It makes them a little bit more vibrant in the timeline or whatever, because it's a small screen, right? So sharpening it will actually make the image look a little bit better. So that is my little tip and trick before you post. After that, ready to go ahead and post, do everything that you're gonna do. But yeah, so hopefully that helps you guys. I know this was kind of a lot to take in one video, but hopefully this helps you guys when you were trying to edit your photos from your phone. There's nothing crazy to it. There's no secret trick or anything. I don't have a preset list of filters that I use. I actually really don't like filters. I like to kind of edit everything manually. But hopefully this teaches you guys a little bit about kind of my theory, right? So what we're doing is we're making photos pop a little bit more, we're making them realistic. We're trying to tell a little bit of a story with the color. So if you're trying to go with a cold theme, right, you're shooting in the snow, tend to edit a little more blue. Leave some of those blues in, have them be a little more teal. If you're trying to have something that's warm, like a desert feel, it's hot, you want to have a little bit more of an exposure to it, right? It's brighter, and then we're going to have a little bit more of a warm color tone to it. So you can use that to your advantage to tell a little bit of a story and kind of put the viewer where you were when you took that photo. So hopefully that helps you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I have a bunch more videos coming, and if you have any questions or there's anything else you want to know, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Thanks. See you guys in the next video.